Welcome to episode 169 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's April 18, 2021, and just before midnight in Europe, football's most powerful club owners try to pull off a coup. 12 clubs, 3 countries, 1 breakaway league, no meaningful consultation with supporters, no real respect for the existing pyramid, and an idea so explosive that, within 48 hours, it is already collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance. This is the story of the European Super League. And to understand how we got here, you have to begin with a simple truth. Football became the world's biggest sport, not because the richest clubs seized it, but because institutions organized it. The Football Association codified the laws in 1863. FIFA was founded in 1904 to regulate the international game. UEFA was formed in 1954 to give Europe a continental structure, and within a year, the European Cup had begun. The game grew because rules were shared, competitions were recognized, and merit mattered. That multilateral architecture is not glamorous, but it is why football scaled. It is also why the European Cup mattered so much. Once UEFA took charge of Europe's elite club competition, something larger than domestic football became possible. And right from the start, Real Madrid understood it better than anyone. As we talked about in episode 150, the Di Stefano Bernabeu axis helped Madrid dominate the first 5 European Cups and turn continental football into myth. That was the beginning of one version of elite power. The next great leap came in the early 1990s. In England, the Premier League broke away from the Football League in 92 and transformed the domestic game's commercial structure. That same era saw the European Cup evolve into the UEFA Champions League. Bigger television deals, more branding, more matches, more money, and more global reach. And over the next 30 years, that machine became enormous. Not every club won, of course. Many clubs participated, but the same names kept clustering near the top. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, Manchester United, Milan, Liverpool, Juventus. Later, Manchester City, Chelsea, and Paris Saint-Germain. The modern Champions League widened access, but wealth still concentrated gravity. Then came the media revolution. The biggest clubs no longer lived only for their local crowd or even their domestic market. They became global content brands. They could sell shirts in Asia, tours in America, sponsorships in the Gulf, and television subscriptions almost everywhere. And once that happened, a dangerous idea became easier to sell in the boardroom. Why should giant clubs risk their value in open competition when they could guarantee premium matchups against each other? Why play your way in when you can reserve your place? Why leave revenue to UEFA when you can govern the ecosystem yourself? That was the temptation. And by 2021, it had become a plan. The COVID pandemic sharpened it. Revenues were volatile. Stadiums were empty. Owners talked about instability in the existing model. Secret talks had already been going on for months. JP Morgan was lined up with the financing. Invitations were circulating quietly. The design was not fully closed, but it was closed enough. 15 founding members were supposed to be permanent, with only 5 qualifiers each season. Governance would sit with the founding clubs themselves. That is not a football pyramid. That is a private members club with a velvet rope. And the timing was no accident. The announcement came just hours before UEFA was due to sign off on reforms to the Champions League. That mattered, because this was not only an attempted breakaway, it was also a power play. A bid either to force a bigger share of the money or to leave with the cash register altogether. Then came the night of April 18. The statement dropped. 12 clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Juventus, Inter, Milan, Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Tottenham. The Super League would be a new midweek competition, governed by its founding clubs. Florentino Perez became its first chairman. The language was corporate, almost antiseptic. Strategic vision, sustainability, quality, intensity, and 4 billion fans. But everyone could see what it really was. A breakaway by the rich and for the rich. And the backlash was immediate. UEFA, the national leagues, and the federations condemned it. FIFA expressed disapproval. Politicians moved quickly. Emmanuel Macron backed the refusal of French clubs to join. Boris Johnson called the plan damaging and soon threatened legislation. Bayern München stayed out. Paris Saint-Germain stayed out. Borussia Dortmund stayed out. The absences mattered because they showed the biggest clubs were not even united. Then the football world started speaking in its own language. At Ellen Road the next day, before Leeds played Liverpool, the Leeds players warmed up in shirts that read, "Earn it," and on the back, "Football is for the fans." That was the whole argument in 8 words. Earn it. Not inherit it, not negotiate it, not guarantee it in a Manhattan financing deck, but earn it. Jurgen Klopp, caught in the middle, said he and the players had not been involved. Liverpool's players later made their opposition clear too. Across Europe, supporters groups reacted with fury, not because they loved UEFA, but because they understood instinctively what was being taken away. Football has always had inequality, but it also had aspiration. The small club could still dream. The provincial champion could still arrive. The giant still had to qualify. Take that away and you're not polishing football. You're replacing it. And that is what the 12 clubs misread most badly. They thought the key stakeholders were broadcasters, banks, and balance sheets. They forgot the people. They forgot the season ticket holder who inherited the stand from his father. They forgot the away fan on a freezing Wednesday. They forgot the supporter in Jakarta or Johannesburg or Kansas City who may love a giant club, but still understands that greatness has to be earned on the pitch. They forgot who took them to the dance. By April 20, the revolt was no longer theoretical. Chelsea fans gathered outside Stamford Bridge. The buses were blocked. Peter Cech came out to calm people down. Inside the clubs, panic spread. Owners could suddenly see that this was not a difficult PR cycle. It was an existential own goal. Manchester City were first to begin formal withdrawal. Chelsea followed. Then Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United and Tottenham. The Italian and Spanish clubs began to wobble. And just like that, the Super League that had been designed as a permanent new order died before it ever staged a match. So what did it mean? It was one of the rare moments when football supporters visibly defeated capital. Not permanently, not universally, but decisively. Fans forced a retreat. Politicians helped. Broadcasters recoiled. Governing bodies pushed back. Players spoke. Managers distanced themselves. And the clubs blinked. And it reminded everyone what European football actually is. It is not just inventory for global streaming platforms. It is not just premium content. It is an ecosystem built on sporting merit, national leagues, local identity, and a ladder that, however imperfectly, still allows movement, jeopardy, and dreams. And finally, it didn't solve the underlying tension, and that part matters. UEFA survived, but it also adapted. The Champions League was reformed again. From 24-25, it expanded to 36 clubs and moved into the new league phase model. More matches, more big fixtures, more inventory. In other words, the institutions helped, but they also moved because the commercial pressure was real. And that is why this story is not just a triumphalist one. The 2021 Super League failed spectacularly, but the forces that produced it didn't vanish. Elite clubs are still huge. Owners still want certainty. Media money still rewards concentration. Supporters are still asked to pay more and more for access to the game they built. So perhaps the real lesson is not that football became safe. It is that it became warned. Before we go, 3 things to take away from April 18, 2021. First, the European Super League was not an isolated freak idea. It was the logical extreme of 30 years of concentrated wealth, media growth, and elite club impatience with shared governance. Second, the project failed because its architects forgot football's core stakeholders. Fans did not defend UEFA so much as they defended sporting merit, local identity, and the open pyramid. And third, the Super League died quickly, but the argument beneath it didn't. The struggle between collective governance and private capture is still one of modern football's central battles. On this day in 2021, 12 of Europe's richest clubs announced a breakaway Super League, only to discover almost immediately that football's people still had the power to tell them no. At least for now. That's all for episode 169 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. Tomorrow, we go to Montevideo on April 19, 1960, for the very first match in the Copa de Campeones de América, what we now call the Copa Libertadores, and Peñarol opened it with a bang. See you then.